Stuurman is going to be our next speaker. Experienced headmaster with a demonstrated history of working in the education management industry. Skilled in education technology, English, e-learning, classroom management and psychological counseling. Strong educational professional with LDP focused in organizational leadership from University of Witwatersrand is right here with us, ladies and gentlemen. Go ahead and welcome Wayne on board.
Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where in the world you are joining us. I'm joining you from a very sunny Johannesburg. My name is Wayne Stuurman. I've recently been appointed as Director of Membership and Programs for the Independent Schools Association of Southern Africa. But for the past 25 years, I've been involved in education in various roles as coach, teacher, housemaster, headmaster, and this is in both monastic and co-educational schools. Just a thank you to the organizers IBE Forum for the opportunity to be able to present to you today. My presentation was first inspired by some articles I'd read, but also not so much by the how for the Fourth Industrial Revolution, but to a greater extent by the why. But I shall deal with both the how and both the why. In our educational sector, we have all come across those people, including some teachers, who have been reluctant to embrace technology and to prepare students adequately to engage with it. And they are the ones who ask the question why. And their reluctance may sometimes stem from a fear of the unknown. So I sought to bring them closer to the unknown by enlightening them with what 4IR means, how is it impacting us, and what that means for all of us. I think if people understand the Fourth Industrial Revolution better, then they are able to be more motivated to be engaged by it and also to learn more about it. Hopefully, I'll be able to present that to you today and be able to encourage so that you may help convince the naysayers. I think sometimes we are so set on the interventions and change that we sometimes neglect to manage that change and include those who can, as well as those who cannot, or those who are fearful of technology. So that can sometimes be the greatest obstacle that we are faced with when we want to engage with technological change. Before I jump straight into it, I just want to give a quick overview of what I'll be covering this morning. Firstly, in order to put appropriate interventions in place for preparing students, we need to establish what we are dealing with, how have we got to this point, and also the technological and the industrial revolutions that have laid the foundation for the Fourth Industrial Revolution. We will have then a brief look at how it is impacting us, followed by the technological shifts that have influenced it. I will then cover some interventions that may help us to prepare students for adequately dealing with and successfully dealing with the Fourth Industrial Revolution. Here we will look at interventions for repurposing education and matching the purpose with societal needs. We will then have a look at international or global mindfulness, and finally I'll cover what is the Fourth Industrial Revolution. The advent of the steam engine in the 18th century led us into the First Industrial Revolution, allowing production to be mechanized for the first time. And this drove social change as people became increasingly more urbanized. And then in the Second Industrial Revolution, electricity and other scientific advancements led to mass production. We've seen the Ford era, if we can call it that. And then the third is the emergence of computers and digital technology. This led to increasing automation and the manufacturing and the disruption of industries. This included banking, energy, and communication. This era was often called the First Information Revolution. And then in the early 21st century, we were brought into the fourth industrial revolution. This was brought about by artificial intelligence and the information technologies which brought us there. If 3IR is the first information revolution, then 4IR is certainly the second information revolution. So how is this impacting on us? Firstly, it affects how we relate to each other. Inter and intrapersonal relationships. Social media, as an example, we see how people feel more courageous or more confident to say whatever they want without a filter, because it's sometimes easier to sit behind a screen and sometimes even behind a pseudonym. This brings about things such as cyberbullying for our children. We also see more of these relationships developing in our children and how we relate to each other. I take, for example, my 1-year-old daughter. Now, she has not met her grandparents who due to COVID, they live in the Netherlands, but we've not been able to see to it that she meets her grandparents. But she already recognizes them on screen, and she's already got a relationship with them. So this is how we relate to each other during this time. It impacts on us on how we live. So we have digital and remote access to virtually everything. Maybe this makes us a little bit lazy sometimes in some people's eyes, but it does make life more convenient in some ways. We can shop online, and what a time saver. It affects or it impacts on how we educate. While I've been teaching in the last 2 years during the COVID, we've been able to teach online. We've been able to use a hybrid model. We've been able to tutor, and this has happened online. Teachers have become more accessible. This also creates a different job for somebody out there. Remember, every time a new job is created, it has an implication for teaching and for education. And so new skill sets are being taught. It impacts on us on how we work. So over the past few years, we've been able to conduct meetings and conferences like these virtually on various platforms around the world. In fact, from anywhere in the world. In many respects, this has been efficiency in terms of travel and costs. A further point to consider that has been thrust upon us is the issue of cybersecurity and the POPIA Acts in the various countries. Apart from how it affects our work, how it affects our lives, how it affects our education right now, the bigger question we need to ask ourselves is, how will it affect us in 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now? And therein lies the challenge for education and learning. So an easy way to understand the fourth industrial revolution is to look at the technologies that have driven it. So we'll start off here with faster computer processing. The new computational technologies are making computers smarter. They enable computers to process vast amount of data faster than ever before, while the advent of the cloud has allowed businesses to safely store and access the information from anywhere with internet access. Quantum computing technologies now in the development will eventually make computers 1,000,000 times more powerful. I know this. When I want to buy a new computer, I want to know how powerful is it? How fast is it? Another smart technology is artificial intelligence and robotics. Artificial intelligence describes that computers can think like humans. They can recognize complex patterns, process information, draw conclusions, and even make recommendations sometimes. Robotics refers to the design, the manufacture, the use of robots for personal and commercial use. While we're yet to see robots or robot assistants in our home, technological advances have made robots increasingly more complex and sophisticated. And they are being used in fields as wide-ranging as manufacturing, health, safety, and human assistance. The next smart technology is software and augmented and virtual reality. So virtual reality offers immersive digital experience, often using a headset, which simulate the real world, while augmented reality merges the digital and the physical worlds. Examples include ladies' makeup apps, which allows them to digitally experiment with makeup products before buying them, And then we have the Google Translate phone application, which allows us to scan and instantly translate street signs, menus, and other text. And then we get to big data and blockchain. Simply put, big data is larger, more complex data, especially from new data sources. These data sets are so voluminous that traditional data processing software just cannot manage them. And then the blockchain, which is a secure, decentralized, and transparent way of recording and sharing data with no need to rely on third-party intermediaries. The technology can be used in many ways, including supply chains which are traceable, securing massive medical data anonymously, and combating voter fraud even. And then we've also got 3D printing and biotechnology. So biotechnology harnesses the cellular and the biomolecular processes to develop new technologies and products which can be used for a range of uses, including developing pharmaceuticals and materials, which has been especially useful in the past 2 years. It's more efficient manufacturing processes and cleaning, more cleaner or efficient energy sources. 3D printing allows manufacturing businesses to print their own parts with less tools at a lower cost and faster than traditional processes. Plus, designs can be customized to ensure a perfect fit. And then the last smart technology I want to talk about is the Internet of Things. This describes everyday items, from medical wearables that monitor users' physical conditions to cars and tracking devices inserted into parcels, connected to the internet and identifiable by other devices. A big plus for businesses is that they can collect data or customer data from constantly connected products, allowing them to gauge how customers use the products and tailor marketing campaigns accordingly. There are also many industrial applications, such as farmers putting Internet of Things sensors into fields to monitor soil attributes and inform decisions about when or how to fertilize. Next, I said we were going to talk about matching the purpose of education and societal needs. When we go back through history, we see that the purpose of education has always been based around the needs of society during any particular period or during any particular time. And so now we find ourselves again looking at the purpose of education as we transition into the fourth industrial revolution. In this day and age, education serves to prepare students for a specific task or specific discipline to do something. But as we progress further through this period, we will need to equip our learners or our students to develop the skills or the mindset to do anything rather than just a particular something. We can already see that people change career or make career moves more often these days. And this will become more and more evident as we move into the future. So hence, doing something versus doing anything. So this also implies that apart from technological skills, the workforce will require a different set of soft skills. And so according to the World Economic Forum report, The Future of Jobs, 10 skills that are needed for the fourth industrial revolution include the following: complex problem solving, critical thinking, creativity, people management, coordinating with others, or collaboration if you want to use that word, emotional intelligence, and this has been so important, judgment and decision making, being service orientated, negotiation skills, cognitive flexibilities. These are all soft skills that will stand us in good stead or for a wider spectrum of fields as we move into the future. And so again, anything versus opposed to something. These skills will allow us to do mostly anything as opposed to just one particular task that we gear ourselves for when we enter the workforce. I think we can all recognize these skills as 21st century skills or 4IR skills. The reality, though, is that we are already 22 years into the 21st century. And so two of the many interventions that we can put in place to address some of these skills, or all of these skills, is to improve STEAM or STEM. I've already heard people speak about that this morning, but also to implement what we call maker spaces. So we'll just deal with those two and then we'll carry on. So the first one, STEAM education, improving STEAM education. So STEAM is the science, technology, or engineering, art, and maths. It was first called STEM, and now it is more known as STEAM. So STEAM will need to improve across the board, regardless of income levels, age, or gender. And there's no doubt that every worker in the future will need some technical skills. And so the improvement of STEM or STEAM education is certainly going to be warranted. But it's important to note that we shouldn't adopt an either-or mentality. We need to work with technology. We will still need to help our students understand the values that will help us learn how to use this new technologies or these new shifts ethically and morally. Therefore, humanities training for professionals will become essential. In fact, according to the Future of Jobs report of 2018 from the World Economic Forum, executives still desired employees with critical thinking and collaboration skills, even more so sometimes than technical skills. Next, let's have a quick look at making schools maker spaces. So maker space is just, in my mind, that is just anything where you have a space where you can make things, where you can be creative. And I think our schools need to create some of these spaces or become these spaces. And so to allow our learners or to allow our students to practice their curiosity, their problem solving, their inquisitiveness, and the iterations of failure, schools need to provide appropriate learning environments. This will enable students to be creators using a wide variety of not only physical but also digital tools. And this can help equip children with a love of learning, which is so important. We won't get anywhere without a love of learning. And that will allow them then to make more sense of the world. There's so much information coming in that we need to make sense of the world, and we need to allow them to do this creatively. And this is done through hands-on experiences, which emphasizes collaboration and creativity, which are two of those soft skills I spoke about just a little earlier. If I move on to educator training, the American philosopher John Dewey, and I've heard this quote from one of the speakers this morning, and it reads that if we teach today's students as we taught yesterday's, we rob them of tomorrow. So let's delve a little deeper into educator training. So even though he lived well before, John Dewey lived well before the beginnings of the fourth industrial revolution, his words are still very appropriate today. And so rather than teachers distilling information to students, they need to memorize, teachers will need to become guides to help students facilitate their own learning. And this is so important, to facilitate their own learning and their lines of inquiry. They need to take ownership of this. Failure needs to be embraced as an essential step to learning. And also teaching needs to be embraced. Failure in teaching, we did get it wrong and then we get it right. Otherwise, we just carry on along the wrong road. And then also, additionally, teaching will become more personalized. We've already seen this in homeschooling, but this can also happen in broader schooling as well. And this will be supported by bringing in technologies such as artificial intelligence and machine learning. And then higher education. And here, from how long degrees take to forging stronger ties between institutions of higher learning and industry, changes will need to be made to our post-secondary education. learning where to prepare students for 4IR adequately. And during the fourth industrial revolution, college qualifications will become shorter and more focused, and colleges will provide more lifelong learning. We can't stop at the end of our formal schooling. Lifelong learning is important. And this will happen with modular post-grad qualifications throughout our working lives as adults as well. And this will impact on our earlier learning levels. Will need to modify the preparation classes. For example, it is essential that the seeds for this type of learning are set in schools by offering students opportunities to learn topics beyond just the core curriculum, but also to develop, as I said earlier, to develop that love of learning, which leads me to my next quote on lifelong learning models. In his book Future Shock, Alvin Toffler wrote, "The illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn." And this is quite important. And then further on to lifelong learning models. Not only is there the reality that machines may take over human jobs that we do today. This may be a reality already. But according to the Dell Technologies and Institute for the Future report, 85% of the jobs in 2030 don't even exist yet. We've seen this happening over the last 2 years, where there's been new jobs. Every time there's a shift in society, new jobs comes along. And so we're already in progress as far as that's concerned. Structured education can no longer end after leaving school. I've already said that, or leaving college. Education must become a lifelong endeavor. And so the sources for education needs to evolve to provide those opportunities. And here we speak about LinkedIn learning, online learning, or MOOCs, as we call it. And it's quite simple. You just sign up online and you study, or you complete a course. I know that in my job, if there's a particular skill that I suddenly find lacking, as the landscape, for instance, changes, I can quite easily go onto LinkedIn Learning or any online learning platform for that matter, and I can look it up. I can see, right, this is where I need to improve on, and I can sign up and I can upskill myself in that regard, and I think everybody can do that. And attributes such as creativity, curiosity, and design thinking will become essential for the future workforce. MOOCs and LinkedIn Learning can also help you with this: design thinking, creativity, and curiosity. People will no longer start a career path and only grow with one role. You will shift from careers, and this will happen more and more, as I already mentioned. Lifelong learning also requires, as I said before, a degree of your own design and your own responsibility for the skills that you feel that you need to acquire. Next, we're going to move into international mindfulness. And here we need to recognize that we live in a digital, interconnected world. And employees of the future, they will need to have this global mindset. Schools and educators must adapt learning to take this into account. For example, the social sciences learning area, and in particular history, might not be taught from the perspective of one area or one part of the world or one country, but rather using examples from all around the world as we become more globalized. In fact, all learning areas needs to adjust to this. And so while there is a place for teaching and knowing the local curriculum, it does need to focus more broadly and cover topics and examples of a broader spectrum. And then also, instead of teaching the same languages that have always been taught, schools should look at international demand and the language of emerging markets. I know that I would need to learn a new language, and perhaps we can introduce this into school if we are able to do that. And just speaking about globalization, I do something called the 7 Summit, which I do in my spare time. I travel and I halfway through climbing the highest mountain on every continent. And this has allowed me to travel. But it's not always just about the mountains that I go and climb. It's about traveling. It's about engaging with people from different backgrounds. And this too is learning, and this too is education. And so it's enriching how we see different people from different cultures and different backgrounds applying their soft skills. So encourage your students to travel if they do have the means. That too is a form of education. And then finally, I want to touch on developing human potential. And so even though machines are mastering many tasks that are typically being performed by human beings, people are still more adept at creative endeavors, imagination, critical thinking, social interaction, and the physical dexterity which computers and machines cannot always give us. And the educational system needs to develop these inherent abilities in humans so they are equipped to partner with the machines in the future rather than compete with them. I think, as I said earlier, we need to embrace technology, but we have those people that are fearful of technology. And so we need to encourage them to partner with technology. Having said that, values, ethics, and morals are still important. And so there is also, while we're developing human potential, there is a role for leadership development in schools. So for the leaders, retaining the human element in an increasingly digital world will be vital for future success. And so it becomes clear that the digital age requires different qualities from business leaders as well. We will need to be tech savvy, but also mindful who understands technology well enough, and help people along that way. Just one of my favorite quotes from Steve Jobs is that you can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards. So you have to trust that the dots will somehow connect in the future. You have to trust in something, your gut, your destiny, life, karma, whatever it is. Just in conclusion, any industrial revolution or change is often met with fear and trepidation. Not only is artificial intelligence and automation impacting our lives daily in what we do and how we earn a living, but it's also transforming industries, how things are made, how things are consumed, and even how countries are being governed. And it raises the question, what impact will it have on the jobs and careers over the next few years and decades? And the answer obviously depends to a large extent on what career path you choose. But get those skills, get those soft skills. While many of today's occupations will still exist in the future, they'll be transformed. And in many cases, occupational categories will start to overlap with one another as new roles develop. This is already happening at the rate. So it's not to say that artificial intelligence automation will automatically replace them, but rather that people will have to adapt and learn how to use technology and enhance the existing processes. What is certain is that the new generation will become increasingly diverse and analytical in their way of thinking. They will continuously adopt new skills and be more adaptable to frequent changes in the workplace, in their roles, as the world is changing, as new jobs start to open up, and as new skills become, or some certain skills become obsolete. And so innately human characteristics such as creativity and empathy is hard to replace, and will be less affected, at least for now, as machines can already be taught to dream, but this is with bizarre consequences. What also becomes evident is that the education system as we know it will need to be changed. The world's economy or for a long time need a more robust workforce, which means making sure that people become employable for longer. Reskilling a workforce regularly during a person's career will become the norm. Widespread disruption is imminent, and therefore preparation is key. And on that note, I'd like to say thank you very much. We're going to before we go into the Q&A session, just my LinkedIn address is there. You would also be able to pick it on the website. And please connect with me afterwards. I would love to connect with delegates. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much, Wayne. It was a pleasure having you on board with us.
Thank you. I'll just quickly browse through some questions.
Yes.
Yes, one. In relation to the 10 skills for future workforce, do you not think that all courses should teach design thinking, and would this not improve these skills as they look at the 6 key areas: empathy, defining goals through combining research, ideation, prototyping, testing based on user feedback, and ultimately implementation? The process is very human-centered, but engages multiple types of thinking while working with people. Yes, certainly. If we look at those 10 skills, design thinking does become more important. As I said, we need to design think our careers. We need to design think how we're going to implement things in schools and in the workforce. Yes, it is quite human-centered, my presentation, but it is important. We must not forget that human element, and we must make sure that we develop human potential as well as we move along this course. We must not neglect that part. Just have a look for another question. What are some of these psychological and social disruptions as a result of technology that we need to prepare our students for in the future? And is it really possible to predict them if we have not yet experienced them? I'll answer the second question. Is it really possible to predict them? Yes and no. If we give them those problem-solving skills, well, we don't know what the problems are going to be, but we can teach them how to engage with the problem, how to go about tackling a problem, and how to attempt to solve it. So we give them problem-solving skills, we give them critical thinking skills, and that will help them to deal with whatever comes their way. Remember, I spoke about something versus anything. So we give them those soft skills, and that equips them to a certain extent to deal with anything as opposed to just something. The other part of the question was, what are some of the psychological and social disruptions as a result of technology? We need to focus here on things such as empathy, such as social skills, such as team building, social interactions. So there is, what we always say, there needs to be balance to some extent. We do see a lot more cyberbullying happening, but if we teach children good citizenship, whether they're online or whether they're not online, you can be a good citizen digitally, or you can be a good citizen not digitally, or you can be a bad citizen digitally or not digitally. But we need to equip them with those skills, the empathy skills, collaboration. When we do that, we will have hopefully less psychological and social disruption. But they will be there. We just need to give them these skills to be able to deal with them. Thank you very much. I think I've covered most of the questions that there was, unless there is any more. Thank you very much. Thank you to IBEF Forum for the opportunity again. Have a lovely day, everybody. Enjoy the rest of the afternoon, the rest of the conference. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Wayne. It was a pleasure having you on board. If you have any more questions, we'll mail it across to you so that you can go ahead and reply to them.
Will do. Thank you very much.
Thank you so
Goodbye,
much. Have a
everyone.
great day ahead. Bye-bye.